The afternoon at Falcon Ridge Air Force Base looked normal, just like any other busy day. The large mess hall buzzed with noise. Soldiers lined up for lunch, trays clicked, chairs scraped, and laughter echoed from different corners. It was the kind of everyday noise that made the place feel alive. People talked about training, new orders, weekend plans, and even jokes about their officers. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing seemed special. Not yet near the entrance, a group of young airmen were joking loudly about a drill that had gone wrong in the morning. A few Navy sailors were seated on the left side, chatting quietly over their food. Army soldiers sat on the right, tired from field exercises, and in the center sat several Air Force officers eating together. Life was happening the way it always did, just another ordinary day. But then, the doors opened. The sound wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Yet somehow, the energy in the hall shifted just a little when an elderly man stepped inside. At first, no one noticed him. He walked slowly, but with a calm steadiness. He wasn't wearing any modern uniform. Instead, he wore an old red leather jacket, faded from years of use, and simple jeans. His silver hair was neatly brushed, and his eyes had a quiet power in them. Sharp, observant, peaceful but strong eyes that had seen much more than the people in the hall could imagine. For a moment, some soldiers looked at him with curiosity. Visitors were not common here, especially elderly ones. A young airman whispered to his friend, pointing toward the man, "Who's that? Maybe someone's grandpa?" They both laughed lightly. The old man didn't react to anyone. He walked to an empty metal table at the corner and sat down gently. His movements were slow but confident. He looked around the hall not with confusion or wonder, but like someone remembering an old memory. As he sat, a few more soldiers took notice of him. Something about him didn't fit the picture of a lost visitor or a confused old man. There was something different, something warm but powerful. At another table, a young USAF captain named Captain Ross noticed the old man too. Ross was known around the base for his confidence, bold personality, and sometimes his sharp mouth. He believed he understood the military better than most and rarely held back his comments. Many respected his skill, but some disliked his attitude. Ross raised an eyebrow when he saw the old man sitting quietly at the corner. "Hey, look at that," Ross said to the lieutenant sitting with him. Another retired guy wandering around. "They really need to check the gates better." The lieutenants chuckled politely. They never disagreed with Ross, especially when he was in a joking mood. Ross kept staring at the old man, thinking that he looked out of place, and maybe even a bit funny. Across the hall, Lieutenant Sarah, a Navy officer known for her sharp memory, stared at the old man for a few seconds longer than anyone else. Something about his face looked familiar, but she couldn't place it yet. She shook her head, thinking she was mistaken, and went back to her food. Meanwhile, the old man placed his weathered hands on the metal table and simply watched the room, not judging, not nervous, just watching, like someone who had once stood in a place like this long ago. As minutes passed, more people began to whisper. Some wondered if he was lost. Others thought he was visiting someone. But no one approached him. No one except Captain Ross. Ross stood up with a confident smirk, brushing invisible dust from his uniform. "Let's see what this old-timer is doing here," he said with a proud grin. His tone made the lieutenants stiffen slightly. They knew Ross loved messing with people, especially older veterans who looked harmless. As Ross walked toward the old man, the room didn't exactly fall silent, but the noise lowered just enough. People noticed the captain's walk fast, proud, and loud. A few soldiers turned their heads to see what would happen next. Even the Navy officers paused their conversation. The old man looked up slowly when Ross stopped in front of him. "Good afternoon," the old man said politely, his voice gentle but firm. Ross didn't return the greeting. He folded his arms. "Afternoon," he said, pretending to be friendly. "First time on a base, old-timer?" A couple of younger soldiers snickered under their breath. They weren't trying to be rude. They just followed the captain's lead. The old man simply smiled. It wasn't a sarcastic smile. It wasn't nervous. It was warm, peaceful, almost wise. No, the old man replied. I've been on a base before. Ross raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? This base? He asked dramatically. No, the old man said. But places like this? Yes, Ross chuckled. Well, we like to keep things organized here. Visitors usually check in at the front. You just wandered in? His tone was sharp, teasing, and a bit arrogant. The old man didn't seem offended. I walked in because I needed to, he said calmly. More soldiers began paying attention now. Some nudged each other to keep quiet and watch. A few Navy sailors leaned forward. The Army soldiers stopped eating. Ross smirked again. So tell me, old man, what's your rank? Or did you just wear that jacket because it looks cool? A wave of soft laughter moved across the hall, but something subtle happened. The old man didn't laugh. Instead, he looked around the room. His eyes met the eyes of soldiers, officers, sailors, one by one. And suddenly, the hall grew just a bit quieter. There was a weight behind his gaze. A weight only people who had been in real battles, real missions, real danger carried. Ross noticed this shift too, but he ignored it. I asked you a question, Ross said, tapping his foot impatiently. What rank were you? Private? Corporal? Something low? The old man took a slow breath, folding his hands together. Everyone waited. Something was coming. Something no one expected. And at that moment, the entire hall felt the suspense tighten. Just before the old man could answer, the mess hall grew quieter as the old man sat there, still calm, still steady. Captain Ross stood over him, waiting for an answer. The young soldiers nearby held their breath, sensing that something unusual was about to happen. The air felt heavier, like a storm coming before anyone could see dark clouds. The old man finally lifted his head. His eyes were soft, kind, but deep, like someone who had traveled far and seen things most people couldn't imagine. He looked at Ross for a long moment before speaking, and during that pause, even the sound of trays and spoons faded into a low background hum. My rank? The old man repeated quietly, as if remembering something far away. It's been a long time. Ross rolled his eyes. Just answer the question, old-timer. Don't worry, we won't laugh. Well, maybe a little. Few soldiers smothered nervous grins. No one wanted to look disrespectful, but everyone could feel the captain's sharp attitude. Ross always enjoyed being the center of attention, especially when teasing someone he thought was harmless. You look too comfortable, Ross continued. Let me guess. You probably did some office job. Maybe pushed papers? Maybe carried tools for real soldiers. The old man smiled again slowly, gently, without offense. His hands rested on the table, old veins visible beneath his skin. But his posture stayed straight. No, the old man replied calmly. I wasn't in an office, Ross smirked. Ah, one of those loud types. Infantry? Did you ever even deploy? The old man didn't answer immediately. He looked around the hall once more, scanning every face. Some soldiers shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. They didn't know why, but something about the man's silence felt powerful. Like someone measuring the room without speaking, Lieutenant Sarah. The Navy officer, who had sensed something earlier, watched more closely. She had stopped eating entirely and leaned forward with interest. Something about the old man's voice, posture, or maybe his presence made her think there was more to this story than an arrogant captain teasing a stranger. Ross tapped his foot again. Come on, old-timer. Don't be shy now. Tell us your rank. I'm sure it was very impressive. The lieutenants next to him laughed politely. Everyone could hear the captain's sarcasm. The old man finally answered, I served for many years. Ross interrupted. Wonderful. So did half the country. That's not a rank. The old man continued, ignoring the rude tone. I served under many commanders, missions overseas. Some dangerous, some quiet, and your rank. Ross insisted loudly, refusing to let him finish. The old man paused again. That pause made the entire mess hall lean closer. Something about the way he talked, calm, slow, steady, began to unsettle a few soldiers. A young airman whispered to his friend, Why does this feel serious? His friend shrugged. I don't know. But the captain is pushing too hard. Arus put his hands on his hips. Look, sir, or whatever you were. We don't have time for stories. Just tell us what rank you held. Private? Corporal. Something simple? Still, the old man did not answer directly. Instead, he asked, in a gentle tone, Why does my rank matter so much to you? Ross blinked, then grinned. Because visitors don't walk in here and sit in our mess hall unless they have a reason. Rank decides respect. And right now, he leaned a bit forward, I'm not seeing much reason to respect you. A soft ouch came from somewhere in the room. A few soldiers exchanged glances. Some shook their heads. Even those who admired Ross for his confidence felt uncomfortable now. The old man didn't lose his smile. Respect is not always about rank, he said simply. Ross scoffed. Sure it is. That's how the military works. Rank first, everything else next. The old man nodded slowly. Rank matters. But there are things higher than rank. The room grew a little quieter again. A few forklinks stopped. Room grew a little quieter again. A few forklinks stopped. A sense of curiosity spread. Ross laughed loudly. Higher than rank. What are you, a philosopher now? No, the old man replied softly. Just someone who served.
That's...
Sarah watched his hands. They were old, but steady to steady. She had seen that steadiness in only a few people, the ones who had been through real danger and survived. With a strong mind, Ross took a step closer. Let me tell you something, old man. This is an active base. And you're sitting here like you own the place. If you don't tell us your rank, maybe security should escort you out. A few gasps came from the tables. Someone whispered, That's too much. But Ross didn't stop. He loved the attention, and he believed he was completely in control. The old man tilted his head, studying Ross carefully. Do you think, the old man said calmly, that rank makes someone better? Yes, Ross replied proudly. Rank shows skill, strength, leadership. Rank shows value. The old man's soft eyes met Ross's sharp ones. And what about wisdom? Ross hesitated only a moment before answering. Experience is good, but rank shows results. The old man nodded again. I see. For the first time, he placed both hands flat on the table, almost like preparing to stand, but he didn't. Instead, he spoke more clearly, his voice carrying across the hall. I did not come here for trouble. I came to sit and remember. That is all, Ross scoffed. Remember what? Your old days of shining boots? A few soldiers winced at the disrespect. The old man looked past Ross. At the flags hanging on the wall, at the rows of tables, at the uniforms everywhere. I came here, he said softly, to remember people I served with. People who never came home? Silence spread quickly. Even Ross seemed caught off guard, but only for a moment. Fine, Ross said, regaining his smug tone. But that still doesn't answer my question. What rank were you? The old man slowly turned back to him. The room felt frozen, waiting, watching. The tension grew thicker. It's like a rope pulled tight. Finally, the old man said only 2 words. My rank. He paused. Everyone leaned in. Was earned. He didn't reveal it. He didn't brag. He didn't react to the mockery at all, and somehow, that calm answer made the room even more unsettled. Ross's jaw tightened. He was losing control of the moment, and he hated that. Stop playing games, Ross snapped. Tell me your rank. Right now. The old man lifted his gaze, steady, confident, unshakable, and just as he opened his mouth to finally speak, the moment the old man opened his mouth to speak, the entire mess hall seemed to pause. Every sound softened. Every movement slowed. Even the air felt still, like the room itself was holding its breath. Soldiers from different branches or force, army, navies, stopped eating. Forks hovered above plates. Conversations died halfway. All eyes shifted toward one table, one captain. And one elderly man sitting calmly with folded hands, Captain Ross, waited. Chest lifted proudly, ready to laugh at whatever answer came out. His arms stayed crossed tightly as he stared down, expecting a low rank. Something small, something he could mock easily. But deep inside, even he felt a strange tension. A tiny flicker of doubt passed through his mind, though he quickly pushed it away. The old man inhaled slowly, like someone choosing his words carefully. His eyes softened, not because he was weak, but because he understood something the rest didn't yet. The room leaned forward without even realizing it. My rank, he repeated softly. But then he stopped again. His gaze drifted away from Ross and scanned the entire hall. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He didn't fear the silence. In fact, the silence seemed to strengthen him. He looked at each group, at the young airmen laughing earlier, at the army soldiers who had paused mid-bite, at the Navy officers now watching him more closely. When his eyes fell on Lieutenant Sarah, she felt her breath catch. Something inside her whispered that she had seen this man before, not in person, but maybe in an article, an old documentary, or a military archive. But she couldn't remember. Not yet. Ross grew impatient. Come on, he said sharply. Say it. It's not that hard. The old man finally looked back at him. Do you really want to know? He asked gently. Ross scoffed. I wouldn't be asking if I didn't. The old man nodded slowly. Very well. But instead of answering directly, he reached to touch the old leather of his jacket. His fingers brushed over a nearly invisible marks, something worn by time. A few sharp-eyed soldiers noticed but couldn't make out what it was. What's that? Whispered one army private. Looks like old insignia? His buddy replied quietly. Many leaned closer without moving from their seats. Ross rolled his eyes. Enough with the drama. We're not in a movie. But the moment he said it, he realized the entire base was watching him, and not with admiration. His confident grin faded just a little. The old man took another breath. Before I tell you my rank, he said calmly, let me ask you something. Ross stared at him, irritated. Ask me what? Why did you join the Air Force? The old man asked. Ross blinked, caught off guard. What kind of question is that? A simple one, the old man replied. Why did you join? Ross straightened his shoulders. To serve my country, to rise in rank. To be the best, the old man nodded respectfully. Good reasons, and you? Ross shot back. Why did you join? To look for free meals on bases? A few soldiers grimaced at the insult. The tension thickened, but the old man's calm never changed. I joined, he said quietly, because I believed in something greater than myself. And because at that time, my country needed me. His voice deepened slightly, carrying weight the room hadn't expected. It wasn't loud, but it hit everyone like a slow echo. Ross felt the air shift again, but forced a chuckle. Nice story. But you still haven't answered my question. The old man looked at him once more. You are very focused on rank. It's how the military works, Ross snapped. No, the old man corrected softly. That is how ego works. A few soldiers let out soft breaths, as if the words hit them unexpectedly. Ross's jaw tightened. His face grew red, but he swallowed his anger to maintain control. You think you're wise, Ross muttered, but this is my base, my mess hall, and I am an officer. You can't just walk in here and... The old man raised a hand gently, not high, not rudely, just enough to signal a pause. Ross froze mid-sentence, shocked that the gesture stopped him. You are an officer, the old man agreed calmly. A young one. Strong, skilled, confident. Ross felt pride returning. But you still have much to learn. The old man finished. A wave of murmurs reached across the room. Not loud, but undeniable. Ross's eyebrows lowered. Learn from you? The old man's eyes softened again. Everyone learns from someone. Ross stepped closer. Tell me your rank now. The old man finally seemed ready. He placed both hands on the table, steady and firm. The muscles in his thin arms flexed slightly. His posture straightened more than anyone had expected. He didn't look like a fragile old man now. He looked like someone who spent years training, commanding, leading. Before I tell you, the old man said, I need you to listen.
Ow.
Ross rolled his eyes. I am listening. Speak. The old man looked straight into Ross's eyes, unblinking. When you mock someone, he said calmly, you should first understand who they are. A shiver ran through the room, not from fear, but from anticipation. Lieutenant Sarah's heartbeat quickened. She whispered to herself, I know him. I know that face. But from where? The old man continued, rank is not something you joke about, not something you measure with arrogance. Rank is sacrifice. Rank is responsibility. Rank is weight. His voice carried across the hall with a strange authority, one that didn't need volume. Ross swallowed. He didn't understand why, but something in the old man's tone struck him deeply. The old man took one final breath. My rank was... And just before the words left his mouth, the mess hall doors opened sharply. Everyone turned. 2 senior officers walked in, one Air Force colonel and one Navy commander. Both stopped when they saw the old man. Their eyes widened. Their expressions changed instantly, from professional to shocked. The colonel whispered, It can't be. The commander stiffened as if standing before a legend. The entire hall sensed something enormous, something no one expected, and before Ross could react. Something no one expected, and before Ross could react. The colonel snapped to attention. The commander snapped to attention. And then they saluted the old man. The entire mess hall froze as the Air Force colonel and the Navy commander stood at attention. Eyes locked on the old man. Their expressions were not casual, not polite. They were expressions of deep respect, even awe. Soldiers glanced at one another, confused. Why were 2 high-ranking officers saluting an elderly stranger in a faded red jacket? Captain Ross's mouth dropped slightly, but he tried to hide it. The old man finally stood up, and suddenly, the room understood something important. Age had touched his hair and his hands, but it had not taken away his strength. His back straightened, his shoulders lifted, and his presence grew heavier, larger, almost commanding the entire space. The colonel's voice shook slightly. Sir, we weren't told you were visiting the base today. A ripple of shock shot through the room, sir. The soldiers whispered. Who calls an old visitor, sir? Ross's confusion turned into a cold pit in his stomach. The old man nodded respectfully to the colonel and commander. I didn't come officially. I came to see the halls again. Just for a moment, Lieutenant Sarah finally remembered where she had seen him. Her eyes widened, her breath caught, and she whispered to the sailor beside her, That's him. That's General Hawk, the ghost of the Pacific. The sailor nearly choked. No, that can't be. But Sarah nodded slowly. It's him, I'm sure. The name spread like a quiet fire across the hall. General Hawk, the ghost of the Pacific. He led the Shadow Wing. He was the youngest 4-star general in Air Force history. Captain Ross felt the blood drain from his face. This was not just any veteran. This was a legend, one whose missions were classified, whose victories were whispered about in training, whose leadership saved countless lives. Ross's voice barely worked. You were a general? The old man, General Hawk, looked at him gently. I was long ago. Ross felt his knees weaken. He had mocked a 4-star general. Not just a high rank, one of the highest ranks in the entire U.S. military. The old general stepped closer to Ross. The hall held its breath, but he did not shout. He did not insult. He did not humiliate Ross the way Ross did to him. Instead, he spoke quietly, son. Rank gives authority, but character gives respect. You showed one, and forgot the other. Ross lowered his head, shame burning hot in his chest. I'm sorry, sir, he whispered. General Hawk placed a hand on Ross's shoulder. Mistakes are lessons in disguise. Were this one well? Ross nodded, unable to look up. Then the general turned to the entire hall. His voice was soft, but it filled every corner. Remember this. The uniform you wear today was once worn by those who came before you. Honor them, even when you do not know their names. Silence followed, respectful, deep silence. General Hawk looked at the flags on the wall, eyes misting slightly. I lost good men on missions no one will ever hear about. I came today only to remember them. The colonel and commander stepped aside, giving him a clear path. Soldiers stood from their seats automatically, backs straight, as if pulled by an invisible force of respect. General Hawk gave one final nod to the room, then walked slowly toward the exit. The hall remained silent until the doors closed behind him. Only then did anyone breathe again. Ross looked at the door, voice barely audible. "I mocked a legend." Lieutenant Sarah replied softly, "No. You learned from one." And with that, the mess hall returned to life, changed, humbled, and carrying a story they would never forget. The END. The END.